we're going to talk about Aristotle, and let me say a couple of introductory things before I actually talk about Aristotle because I kind of want to set this up. Um, Typically speaking, when we talk about moral theory, well, let me back up. When we talk about morality, um, the do's and don'ts, we talk about rules. Just as an example, think of the Ten Commandments, right? In the Bible, do this, don't do this, don't do that, right? Or we think of something like the Golden Rule, behave this way, or even like utilitarianism with the principle of utility, um, act in such and such way, and presumably this thinking about rules, is such that here's the rule. If you follow the rule, then your action will be morally permissible, will be moral, right? If you don't follow the rule or you break the rule, then you're doing something bad. And that's kind of the basis for moral judgment. And just, do your own exploring. Uh, Find out if, the extent you think this is true, but a large part of morality typically is about rule following. Here's the thing you need to do. Aristotle presents us with something a little bit different. I think in many ways unique. I myself am you know a fan. It doesn't mean I think every make some obvious mistakes. There's some obvious criticisms which we'll get to, but Aristotle presents us with a different way of looking at ethics. And if you were in my ethics class, Aristotle, in terms of moral theory, in terms of ethical normative theory, aka moral theory, Aristotle's last, even though he came first. Aristotle was the first one to give us, if you will, a complete, like, uh, worked out theoretical understanding of morality. It doesn't mean he's the best or anything by any means, but I put him last because he encapsulates much of what we might think about in terms of morality contemporarily, but he incorporates a lot of other things that we don't necessarily think about as well. Like, we don't necessarily think about the relationship, like you and I, like when you and I talk about morality, we don't typically, or like, you know, um, you're a priest to his congregation, or your pastor to her, congregation or something. We don't think about, say, for example, the relationship between reason and morality. And there are historical reasons for that. Like, um, the Enlightenment, for example, was supposed to be man's, um, how do I say this? Was supposed to be sort of man's, like, secular salvation, right? Like reason was going to deliver us from the evils of the world, relieve poverty and war and things like that. And there was an attempt, sort of historically, to base, like, morality itself, in terms of human reason. And of course, as the criticism goes, um, the Enlightenment, quote unquote, failed, and with it, the power of reason and so on. It's a I'm characterize It's a caricature almost of what happened. It's obviously way, 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 way more complex than that. Um, but nevertheless, reason, again, for some of these historical reasons, has it doesn't tend to be a large part of how we think about ethics. We think about ethics in terms of feeling, or in terms of commandments, in terms of rules, and so on. And so we look through all of that first, and then by the time we get to Aristotle, Aristotle has a what I consider, and many of us consider, to be sort of a unique take on what ethics is and what the source of ethics is, if you will. We're always concerned about the source of something. right? And so, um, okay, so let's look at then let's look at um, how that starts. Okay, we are constant. So, any comments, questions? Just sort of a just intro comments here. Nothing big. Any comments, questions? Okay, hearing none, I'll continue. All right, we are constantly faced with moral problems. I mean, I can't, I just stop there, right? Just period. All right, my job's done. Everybody go home. Right? Like, we're faced like constantly. It's an intractable fact of human life. Like, welcome to being human. There's not, you can die. That's what you can do. The moment you die, then you don't have to worry about any moral problems. Right? Do I donate to charity? Do I lie in this or that situation? Maybe not to hurt someone's feelings or something like that. Should I call the cops on my neighbors? Is stem cell research wrong? Should I eat meat? And on and on and on and on, right? Those are just sort of ones I can think off the top of my head, but like, you know, like even so, so maybe not every day, I guess, right? It's not like every day you're faced with some deep moral dilemma. That's not what I mean. I mean, being alive and being human, you are faced with moral dilemmas. Everybody is. Children are, they just don't realize it, right? Children are faced with moral dilemmas. They just don't, they don't know what a moral dilemma is necessarily, at least not in the way we do. Now, like I said, previous theories, we looked at utilitarianism and to an extent like relativism, tend to focus on things like sort of rules, the do's and don'ts. But what we call virtue ethics when we study Aristotle, um, isn't concerned with that so much. It's concerned with a different type of question. And those questions are, how should one live? Right? Let me switch over here. So these questions are, just for example, it's not like specifically just these questions. It's these types of questions, right? Ah, stupid pin. So when we talk about virtue ethics, I got to re-angle my ad here. Um, oh, that's horrible. Oh, it did it. What do you know? When we talk about virtue ethics, um, we're after a different sort of inquiry. And questions like, how should one live? Or in particular, like this is a good one. What does it mean to live a life well lived? What does it mean to live a life well lived? And these are different sorts of questions, right? It's not what rule should I follow. It's not what is the nature of goodness, right? It's what does it mean to live well? That's the question. And so what we're concerned with then is what actually let me do this. Is what the ancient Greeks, Aristotle in particular, called eudaimonia. And we will understand eudaimonia as simply well-being. Now, secondarily, we're gonna translate this also as happiness. But I want to canvas this and say that um, happiness is the wrong translation. It's just it's hard to avoid, a, because it's been translated like that so often, and there's very popular translations of this stuff that have been used forever, and they use the translation happiness. You'll come to find out here in a little while why um, happiness is a bad translation, but I am going to use the word. Just know that when I use it, um, I mean like well-being, and we're gonna talk about what that means. But it's hard not. It's like his name is Heracles, not Hercules, but it's kind of like too late, right? Like there's no going back. Like the majority of the population is going to still refer to him as Hercules, even though that's not actually how you pronounce the name, right? But because of some bad transliteration way back and Disney movies, just it's Hercules, right? Hereafter. So I never call him Hercules. I call him Heracles. But um, anyway, that's the point. So I'm just saying that's why happiness. Um, Satisfaction plays a part in this, but it's not simply satisfaction. No, but at a deep fundamental level, yes, satisfaction is important because pleasure and pain are going to be important. But I'll spell that out as we go on. Okay. Um. So then, let's ask. Let's go back here. Let's ask then. Let's start as our starting point. Let's ask the question: what is the good? And I mean the what? That was my computer. What is the good? Yeah, not what is goodness, right? Um not what are goods or anything, right? What is the good? And let's ask ourselves that question. Now, for Aristotle, it can't be like the utilitarians, it can't be just about pleasure or pain. We're going to talk about that. Pleasure and pain is important, but it's not simply about pleasure or pain, right? That's too vulgar, is what he would say. It's too vulgar. Vulgar meaning like unsophisticated, not complicated enough, too simple, base. But it's not simply political either. And Aristotle says we're political animals. We are people that seek each other out to live in specific types of communities uh, because those communities provide the foundations for being virtuous, which this is virtue ethics. So we're going to talk about that. But it's not simply the political either, right? Even though the political state, the city, provides the basis for being virtuous, the capacity for virtuosity resides within each individual. You need the state in order to exercise those capacities, right? So what is the good? It's not simply pleasure. It's not the political, right? I'm going to read you. I'll let you see this too. Actually, let me blow this up if I'm going to show it to you. Ooh, too much. So that's 300%. Let's do 250. Ah, 250 will work. All right. Oh, wrong one. There we go. So here's some Aristotle for you. So remember, what are we in search of? It's not um it's not pleasure and pain. It is not the political, and again he means like the social. It's not merely our social structure, right? Um uh By the way, I meant to tell you, I might be getting a phone call that I'm gonna have to take. If I do, I'm gonna have to take it. Our little doggy is in the hospital right now. He's undergoing surgery, uh, so I forgot to tell you that. So I got my phone here, and okay. So what is it then? Well, let's see what Aristotle says here. Every art and every science reduces, that's a typo, reduces to a teachable form. And in like manner, every action and moral choice aims, it is thought, at some good. Every action and moral choice aims at some um, good. All right, so let's look at these two sentences here, or I guess it's one sentence. These two claims here. First, he says every art and every science reduces to a teachable form. So the Greek word here he's using is techne. And techne is the word that we use for, that he's using in translation would be art, science, right? What that means is something like skill or craft. So that's the word he's using. So for instance, what is techne? Techne here is for example, I don't know, uh, uh, a car mechanic. A car mechanic has a specific type uh, of techne. Let's see if I can hold on. Oh, that's interesting. So I can zoom in, but it won't let me move it. That's weird. Wonder why it won't let me move it. Surely there's got to be something I can do. And there's no. Oh, there we are. Okay. Um, a car mechanic has a certain type of techne. A car mechanic has a certain sort of skill, right? Or um, or a surgeon, or let's say a teacher, or let's say I don't know, a live streamer, right? So think anything. Think anything. Knowing how to make a paper airplane is techne. Does that make sense? So just so we're clear about here. And what he's saying is the thing about techne, it's a skill and a craft is how or you know, this is where we get the word science from. The word science um, is a Latin word. See if I remember the transliteration. That's probably wrong. I can't off the top of my head for some reason I can't remember. Scientia. I mean that's how you pronounce it, Scientia, but I can't remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It comes from sorry, I'm drawing a blank here. It comes from the Latin word scientia, which means knowledge. So in this sense, we by the word science, we mean knowledge, we mean craft, we mean an art, something that is known and that can be practiced. And in that sense, so one, not only is techne sort of skill and craft, but he also stipulates it must be teachable. And if it's teachable, it must also be learnable. I think I just made up a word there. It must be able to be learned. If you claim to know something, so hold on just a second. So if you claim to know something, but you cannot teach it, then as far as Aristotle is concerned, you don't know the thing. So for example, like mysteries, right? What makes a mystery in the ancient sense is it is literally, the word mystery means secret knowledge, right? And you had these things called like the mystery cults and so on. And it actually, it particularly through Christianity, through like the Middle Ages and so on, you get a revival what are called the mystery cults. And it's just kind of at the time, sort of a modern take on like ancient mystery rites. And the thing with the mystery is that to know the mystery, you have to be indoctrinated into the cult and then receive that knowledge, right? So if you claim to know something and yet you can't teach it, or it is not demonstrable, you can't demonstrate it, or even in principle, it can't be known by, say, ordinary means, as far as Aristotle's concerned, you don't know it. You don't know the thing because it can't be taught. It can't be demonstrated. And so, yes, this is where we get the word technology from. It's just it takes on a different form by, the at the turn of the 19th century, right? Couple decades into the 1800s, we get the Industrial Revolution, right? And the word technology takes on a different meaning than what it meant before. About the same time, about the mid 1800s, I forget the exact year, the word scientist and science began to mean something else also. So if you were a scientist, back in the day, in the early 1800s and before that, if you were a scientist, you were called a natural philosopher because you inquired, and hence philosophy, into the natural world, and hence natural philosopher. The word scientist began taking on a different meaning. There's a couple of things that were involved in it when you started having independent departments at universities become really strong and independent and autonomous. You needed a different sort of word to sort of demarcate them. But then you had also itself, like the nature of what people working in the natural world thought that they were doing, that set themselves apart from, say, normal like philosophical speculation and so on. Same thing happened with the word technology. At the outset of the Industrial Revolution, and before it, a little bit before it, and then of course after, the word technology took on different meaning. Now it became closer to what we would think now of as tech, right? And the more we get into a more technologically advanced world, meaning a world that uses material objects in very specific and highly developed ways. So a hoe for tilling the ground, right, is technology, right? That is technology. But we don't tend to think of it, you and I don't tend to think of that as technology. We tend to think of more like sophisticated, like machinery, like computers, or possibly even, like maybe a Tesla car, or sometimes we think of like medical innovations as technology, but really all of it's technology. because all of it involves, in the ancient sense, skill and the ability to sort of manipulate things, right? So sorry for all that. It's these words are important. Okay. Okay. Um then he says every action and every moral choice aims at some good. For which reason a common and by no means bad description of the chief good is that which all things aim at. And so it's not simply what is the good, it's what is the chief good. In some translations, you will have, instead of chief, you'll have best, right? I guess that's a pencil, isn't it? Yeah, whatever, it's all right. So not simply what is the good, but what is the chief good. And what is the chief good? That which all things aim at. No, I don't know why I did a question mark. That which all things aim at. Okay? So let's go back here and we'll flesh this out a little bit. So what is this thing that we're in search of, he asks? What can it be? Does this have a draw function on it? It should. It's all right. I don't need it. What can it be? He says, in different actions and arts. It is different in the healing arts and in the military arts, and similarly the rest. What is the chief good in each? It's not that for the sake of which other things are done. In the healing art, the goal is health. In military art, the goal is victory. In house building, the goal is a house. Right? So what is he? So he's telling us something here. What is he telling us? He's telling us, let's go back to our notes. I'm not going to go through this whole thing. I'm just going to mention this here. But, come on. Move. That little bar there. There we go. In Aristotle's Metaphysics, he goes through, I'm going to list it, but I'm only going to talk about one of them. In terms of causation, he talks about the material cause. He talks about the formal cause. He talks about the efficient cause. And he talks about the final cause. This might seem a little weird to you, but I'm only really concerned with the final cause here, but let me just sort of quickly spell this out. The material cause for an object is literally what it's made out of. It's like the material that, so take a statue. The material cause of a statue is stone or marble or bronze or something, right? So part of what makes the statue, part of what brings the statue into existence is the stuff it's made out of, right? And so on. Then the formal cause is literally the shape that it takes. The form, the shape. What makes David, the statue of David in Florence, Michelangelo's famous statue, right? What makes David David? Well, it's the granite it's made out of, and it's the particular form that it's in, right? The shape. If it's a different shape, it's a different statue. The efficient cause in this case would be human labor. Human labor is what shaped it, is what gave it its shape. Or actually, if you know anything about Michelangelo, this is, I don't know what I think about this, but Michelangelo thought that the statue is already in the block. What his job was is to remove everything else to reveal the shape. And that's, so if you read his writings, that's what he thought he was doing. And if you ever go to Florence, go to the Accademia, and that's where David is. And leading up to David is this short hallway. I forget what it's called, the Hall of Stone or something like that. I can't remember. And you have what we consider to be Michelangelo's like unfinished statues, and you have these big blocks of granite, and there's partial shapes that you can recognize, and it, like, you see a part of an arm and a part of a head, and it looks like the statue is embedded in the stone. It really does. Like, hold on, let me show you. Let me see if I can show you this. I get too excited about stuff. Uh, hold on. So not the yeah, there we go. Okay. Here, let me switch screens here. Oh no, you can see it. Yeah. Let me. So yeah, so let's take, which is a good one. This is a good one. So when you walk through and you see this, I mean, there's, like, you see what I mean? Like, there's the marble, and it looks like there's a statue embedded in it, right? And so Michelangelo thought like he was releasing the statue from the stone, is how he described it. Anyway, whatever. Sorry, the art history for the day. So that's the efficient cause, but the final cause is what I'm concerned with here. The final cause is the, you might say, the purpose or the function or the goal. If you want to get fancy, you might say the teleology, or we would say the telos in Greek. The telos of the object. It's the goal. It's the final thing, right? So what he's telling us here is that when you look at, let's see, how do I want to do this? I'll use his examples. Take house building. What is the goal of house building? The goal of house building is what? A house. Not to build a house. The goal of house building is a house. What is wrong with my computer? It keeps slowing down. See what it's doing? Oh my God, this is so frustrating. The goal of house building is a house. What is the goal? What are his examples? When you study, he says, the military arts. What is the purpose of studying the military arts? What do you do when you study military arts? Well, first question first. What's the goal of studying the military arts? Victory. Victory in war, right? That's why you study the military arts, is to learn how to be a victor in war. What's his other one? Healing. What do you do when you study medicine? What's the goal of studying medicine? Healing. I'm going to go ahead and say health. We'll make it a little more modern here. So, first thing he's pointing to here, right? What he's pointing to here, he's saying, what are we aiming at? He says each individual, right? Sorry to keep going back and forth like this, but you understand, right? Each individual thing here is a techne, right? Each individual thing here is an art, is a craft, is a science. And you study that thing in order to get something else. Does that make sense to you? Okay, so then let me continue here. And in any other, it's going to be something else, right? In short, every action and every moral choice, the end, because in all cases men do everything else with a view to the end, so that there is some one end in all things which are and may be done. Meaning that, yes, like in our examples here, for every action, for every techne, for all things here, let me highlight this. For all things that may be done, that's what this refers to here. For all things that may be done, they do have their own separate ends. They have their own separate final causes. But everything we do aims at some final end, the end, the chief good. And finally, I'll put here, the end, as just to go with this. Anybody play Minecraft? So it depends how you play it, right? So if you play it like I play it, I don't so like the way I play it, like I just like digging. It's basically all I do. I just dig and I try to make these monstrous caverns underneath, and of course diamonds, searching for, like, that's all. It's just relaxing. It's kind of spooky, right? A lot of people like building stuff. I'm not really into building. I'm just into digging. But some people play the game like competitively, right? Online, and there is a final chapter of Minecraft called The End. And I always thought that was funny because the end is literally like the end. That's all. That's the point. If you're into that part of the gameplay, when you reach the end and defeat it, it's literally the end. Like, you can do it all over again if you want, but that's it. That's the goal. Mission accomplished. Go home, turn the game off, start it over, do something, but you have done the end already. I always think of Minecraft when I think about this part of Aristotle, right? And what is he telling us then? He's telling us that there is, in all of our actions, each action has its own end. It's true, its own final cause, right? But all things we do aim at something. And so if we have here, let me do this. If all things aim at some end, and so um I don't know, how do I want to represent this? Um Actually, let me do it this way. I don't mean to rewrite all of this, but I'm trying to think of how best to represent this. So I'm just going to kind of repurpose what we did here. So notice this: house building. I'm not going to do all of it. The end of house building is a house, right? But why do we want a house? It's aiming at something, right? The military arts. We study military arts so we can learn about victory, but why do we want to be victors? Because that points to something. And so on, and so on, and so on for all of our actions, right? It's not simply about survival either, right? It all points to something. And what do you think that something is? That something. So not pleasure. I'm going to get to pleasure. I got to keep track of time here. What time is it? Uh, okay, I got time. It's not simply pleasure. No, I'm going to talk about pleasure. Pleasure is very important. But it doesn't hold the. It's weird, right? We're not going to get into this, but if you really, really look at Aristotle, like pleasure is central. Like John Stuart Mill didn't do anything new. John Stuart Mill made Jeremy Bentham accessible to people who understood Aristotle, right? Central in Aristotle is pleasure and pain, but it gets translated differently, and ultimately, you end up not talking about pleasure or pain as much as you would, even though it really is actually central. But I'm not going to get into that particular um, aspect of it. It's eudaimonia. The end, the chief good, is eudaimonia, and I'm going to put here in parentheses happiness, and you'll see why here in just a second. Well, I mean, so let's do that. So let me ask a question. Is there anyone here who doesn't want to be happy? Is there anyone here who does not want to be happy? Now's your time. You can say yes or I don't know. Yes,
I want to be happy.
What's that?
I want to be happy.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, of course you do. Of course you do. Is there anyone here who does not want to be happy? Anybody? Going once? Going twice? Right? I mean, who here doesn't want to be happy? Of course you want to be happy, right? That's the dream, isn't it? Now, here's a more complicated question. Well, no, I mean, to look. No, look. Do you want to be happy? Generally, the answer is yes, right? People want to be happy. Yes? Now, you might ask how you get to be happy. Part of how you get to be happy is maybe releasing emotions in some specific sort of way, right? But that all leads to happiness, doesn't it? So go back to the scheme here. This is Aristotle's scheme. Something leads to something, which leads to something else, right? So maybe the release. So why do you do, let's say maybe, let's erase this one here. And let's say, let's do some primitive psychology here. And so why do you cry, for example? You might cry in order to release emotion, right? Why would we need to release emotion? So we can be happy. See what I mean? So here's a more complicated question. Great, everybody wants to be happy. No surprise. It's a surprise when someone says, I don't want to be happy. That's the surprise. Here's a more complicated question. Why do you want to be happy? And before you answer that, don't put anything yet. Right? Look at this again. Just look at what's going on here. Right? We have, let me erase this. Just so I can put it back again. Let's use a different color. I like purple here. Let's use that purple. You have a what Aristotle calls a sphere of influence here. And we do this in order to bring about some effect. See, how complicated do I want to make this? Hold on a second. A sphere of influence or an action, right? Something like that. That sphere of influence causes an effect of some sort, or maybe the production of an object, but that would still kind of be an effect. And that effect, sorry, I'm as I'm doing this, I'm realizing some different ways that I could do this. Let's use a different color here really quick. So many colors. I like orange. And then let's go back to purple. Okay. There's some sphere of influence, and like building a house or military arts or crying. There's some action, some sphere of influence, and that produces something. It's for something. It has a function for something, and then that thing performs a function as well. And we're skipping a few steps here, but you get the point. Ultimately, what he's saying is that everything points to living well. So why do you want to be happy? Because it's happiness. Like, ask yourself this. So if I say, why do you want to be happy? And you say anything other than because I want to be happy. If you say, I want to be happy because it opens up possibilities, then what you're saying is happiness itself is good for something. Right? But ask yourself, is happiness actually good for something? Or is happiness itself intrinsic? So here we have some more vocabulary. We have the intrinsic goodness, I should say goodness, and instrumental goodness. When we talk about instrumental goodness, we're essentially talking about, I'll put in quotations. Well, no, let me do this. Goodness that derives from some effect. So, for instance, the good that comes from the medical arts comes from the ability to heal. So the medical arts are good because they provide healing. The good of the medical arts, it is good to study the medical arts because it functions in a certain way, right? It functions in it functions in a way that it provides something. And so that's why the healing arts are good. Or that's why house building is good. House building is good because it provides something, right? So this is what we mean by instrumental goodness, as opposed to intrinsic goodness. Goodness derived from the thing itself.